My name is Randall Dick. I've been here almost a year. Time has really flown. And just a word about how I got here. I was in the unpleasant position of having to find a new church home. And I have a group of businessmen that I interact with, and I mentioned to them that I think I was getting close to finding a church home, that I had been traveling around and narrowed it down to maybe 3 congregations, and that maybe within a month I would have one nailed down. And one of the members of this church, who is also someone I associate with in this group, said, "Randall, do me a favor, or do this for me. Before you make your final decision, come visit my church," meaning Anthem. So, it was out of courtesy, really, because I didn't know anything about Anthem, but I came. And it was obvious, looking back, the Holy Spirit led me here through him and sent me the very clear message: this is the place where you need to be. So I hold your fellow member up with gratitude, and it also, to me, was a real lesson. If we're going to be a servant of God and an outreach of the Holy Spirit in our lives, what if he hadn't said anything? What if he just said, "Boy, that's good, glad for you." But he had what seemed like audacity, in a good way, initially, to say, "Come to my church before you make your decision." And he was just setting it up for God to do the rest. And I just thought maybe that would be it would be encouraging to you to hear that as well. We read today from John, the 7th chapter, verse 53 through chapter 8, verse 11. Then they all went home, but Jesus went. Oh, yes, please stand on your feet if you can. Ever since I've been here, it's been stand on your feet if you're able. My growing up was always, please rise. But I love the stand on your feet. It's so clear. But thank you for doing that. Then they all went home, but Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. At dawn, he appeared again in the temple courts, where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. And the law of Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now, what do you say?" They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." And again he stooped down and continued to write on the ground, and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away, one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left, with the woman still standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin." This is the word of the Lord. Okay, please remain standing for prayer.
God, we thank you for this time, for this gathering. We thank you for your scripture. We pray that the Jesus that is portrayed in this text, that he would come even more alive to us today. We ask this in the name of the resurrected Christ. Amen. You guys can take a seat. It is a joy to be with you guys today. A few years ago, an opinion piece for the New York Times had the following post: "Imagining the world of Harry Potter without its creator and or without its author." Now the question stems, why would a group of people attempt to imagine a series by the long-time sort of beloved J.K. Rowling, right? Well, the answer is that she found herself a victim of a mob mentality over social media for defending the radical idea since about 5 years ago, or 5 minutes ago, depending on how you look at it, that men cannot be women. The attempt was to cancel her, or in other words, to culturally block her from having a prominent public platform or career. And the funny thing and the irony in the story is that when I was growing up, most of the canceling that happened was from Christian communities, conservative sort of communities of, you cannot read, J.K. Rowling. And now today in the 21st century, today it's the progressive non-believers that pronounce the harshest judgments towards this woman. Things have come full circle, my brothers and sisters. In 1987, Alan Bloom wrote his sort of famous book that was widely read called The Closing of the American Mind. And his core argument was rather simple in that book. He was trying to showcase that the American campuses were awash in a form of moral relativism. And those of you who do not know what relativism is, it's just kind of a big fancy word for subjective personal values that had replaced universal moral principles. Things are more felt and intuitive than something that's foundational. Nothing was either right or wrong. Morality was relative, and so you couldn't tell people that they had to live a certain way. That was the idea and that was the belief in many college campuses when Bloom was making this case in 1987. But Bloom's thesis, although to a large extent accurate in that day, I would say it is not as accurate anymore in our culture, in our cultural moment today. Why? It's because college campuses are awash in moral judgment. They're awash. People pronounce strong opinions of what is right and what is wrong, of what can be said and what cannot be said, and so forth and so forth. And so the last decade has given way to an ever-growing trend of moral judgment through what has been commonly known and referred to as cancel culture. It's cancel culture essentially is you look up what the worst of somebody, what they believed, liked, clicked, said, the worst that they've done over the last year, 10, 5, 15, however long you can find stuff on them, right? And then you use this to believe the worst of a person and to sort of define that this is who they are as an individual. If we look at the last century, there's been a rather profound shift that has occurred within the West. For a long time, America was a guilt society. And what I mean by guilt society is the way that you were forced to do something for a large extent, throughout history, was through guilt. If they wanted you to kind of give money, how would they get you to give your money? They would guilt you. You have to. Look at the poor little girl. Look at the poor little kids on TV. Or they would guilt you to do it. To volunteer at a particular club or a particular event, they would push on your guilt. You have to do it essentially. But what many thinkers, many sociologists have been have been talking about and highlighting over the past decade is that we are slowly transitioning from a guilt society to what you would call a shame society. A shame society. We shame people into doing things now, into believing certain things. Shame culture is filled with pronouncements of harsh judgments, with criticism of people and their beliefs. The anthropologist Ruth Benedict, she popularized the distinction between a guilt and a shame culture in this way. Look how she puts it. In a guilt culture, you know you are good or bad by what your conscience feels. In a shame culture, you know you are good or bad by what your community says about you, by whether it honors or excludes you. In a guilt culture, people sometimes feel they do bad things. In a shame culture, social exclusion makes people feel that they are bad. It's a posture of criticism, of rampant and harsh judgment directed towards people. And I would say that this is especially felt in our modern political discourse. How many of you guys sense the judgment, the pronounced judgment over the person that you believe, should be the president or not be president? It's not like, it's begs to differ. It's how dare you, and you see this kind of play out just over the weekend. I was scrolling on Twitter, X, or however you prefer to call it. And the latest controversy was Patrick Mahomes' wife, the Super Bowl quarterback. She made a post. She made a like on a post of the previous president, and boy, you see the shame culture come out at full throttle. Like how dare you like that post? David Brooks, he puts it like this: the guilt culture could be harsh, but at least you could hate the sin and still love the sinner. The modern shame culture allegedly values inclusion and tolerance, but it can be strangely unmerciful to those who disagree and to those who don't fit in. And so this guilt culture giving way to shame culture, what you're noticing in this moment is this resurfacing of this puritanical culture of the 17th and 18th century, where it's very harsh towards individuals for what they believe and what they stand for. It is religious in nature, but it's in an irreligious age. But here's where the difference lies between even the Puritan culture of the few centuries ago, or maybe the Puritan culture that's now among us today. The difference between a sort of guilt culture and a shame culture of today. Here's where the main difference and the main fault lies. We have moral panics in our day-to-day, but what we are losing is the concept of mercy, of grace, and of forgiveness. We are losing some of the bedrock principles of, even you would say, the gospel. We're losing that right before us. And I saw this played out a few years ago when Joe Rogan, something came of what he said. He's a podcaster, for those of you who don't know him, sort of a famous podcaster. He said something a number of years ago, and his speech got resurfaced. And all of a sudden, people are like, "Oh, we need to cancel Joe Rogan." And he came out and he apologized, "Guys, I made a mistake. Sorry, yada yada." And people are like, "That's not good enough. We need more. Let's bring out the pitchforks," kind of thing. And the person that sort of came to his defense, out of all people, was sort of the prominent atheist. And look how he puts it. I found it to be very fascinating, coming from the lips of a very, very well-known atheist, Sam Harris. He says this: "A sincere apology is a moral good, as is the forgiveness with which it is often met. We want to live in a world where people offer sincere apologies, and this is born of the recognition that no one is perfect," to which we all, can say amen. "Each of us is a work in progress. Everyone is growing, and forgiveness itself is one of our highest virtues." And then he goes on and says, "Forgiveness is a miracle of which every single church person says, amen." It is, right? It is absolutely staggering. It's a miracle. To forgive someone, to offer mercy and grace to someone is an absolute miracle. And so the question that I have for us today, how can we, Anthem Church, how can we, living in this shame culture of very strong, pronounced judgments, how can we be a community that offers mercy, grace, and forgiveness? How do we do that? Where do we go? Who do we learn from? And I think before us today is a story where all of these elements come together in this profound and beautiful way. And so let us explore the text together. We have here one of the most powerful, one of the most potent, probably most well-known story of Jesus in the Gospels. The churchgoers love this story, right? And I would say even many non-churchgoers are familiar with this particular story. But before we jump into it, let me just set it up briefly. In the previous chapter, Jesus is at one of the largest Jewish festivals that they hold annually. And so you can imagine this is a gathering of thousands of people. And Jesus sort of comes and arrives late on the scene. And the text highlights how at the last day of the feast, Jesus gets up and publicly, before everyone, says the following words: "Whoever is thirsty, come to me and drink." That's a pretty bold statement to make, right? Could you imagine, some religious leader gets up and he's like, "If you're thirsty, don't go to the well to drink, come to me," right? And so obviously Jesus is, playing off of this, and he's offering a deeper meaning than just physical thirst. But nevertheless, this statement triggers people. The religious leaders hear this and they start plotting. We need to get rid of this Jesus. Why? Because people are actually going to him. People are believing this message that you can go to Christ to drink, kind of thing. And so what ends up happening is this scene picks up. The text picks it up. The next day, Jesus goes to the temple to teach. Next morning, Jesus is back in the temple. And you can imagine maybe hundreds, maybe even 1,000 people are gathering in the temple. Why? They want to hear the man speak himself. And so Jesus is giving teaching, and all of a sudden there's a loud commotion. There's a huge throng of people that are making their way into the temple. Imagine all of a sudden we're sitting here, we're listening to teaching, and all of a sudden there's this loud commotion. Doors are banging, people are coming in. And what do they bring in? A woman, hardly clothed, maybe not even clothed at all. I don't know. And they bring her to the front and they throw her in front of Jesus, and all eyes are just gazed. What is happening, right? Like, what's going on? Who is this woman? Why is she being brought to the temple out of all places? And so this is a moment of instant shame and instant humiliation. Perhaps there are people who know this woman. Maybe there's some people, they went to the temple with her. Maybe there are people in the crowd, they see her, oh, this is my family member. Oh, this is the person that I would go grocery shopping with, at Costco kind of a thing. They recognize her. And here she sits, this woman made a public spectacle of, wondering, how did I end up at the front of the temple? How did I arrive here? Friends, who is this woman? What is she doing here? And I think most of us are familiar with her story, and the reason why is because many of us, we have lived her story in different shapes and in different ways. She had at one time been a young bride with dreams of a married life, about having a husband who loved her and having some kids. And initially, marriage was bliss. They attended church together. They dreamed of starting a family together. And at first, it was all quite innocent. And that's the way things usually always begin. And then, somewhere along the line, she meets another man. And he seems to notice her. He seems to want to listen to what she has to say. And it was rather innocent. But then there came a moment when a few lines were crossed. Maybe it was a touch or a hug that lingered just a little bit longer. And then eventually she crossed another line until eventually it became a full-blown affair. And she ends up going and living in a state of secrecy for a prolonged period of time. The state of having to choose between two different lives, between two distinct worlds, if you will. One world that revolves around her kids and her husband, and the other, it's nights of secrecy, going out with this other man that causes her to be excited. And here's the thing about sin, friends. Sin unchecked always leads to more sin. It just always does. That's just the way it works. Most of the secrets that we harbor and resent, they never start in full bloom. Are you aware of that? It never begins with a full-blown affair. You don't just wake up in somebody else's bed. You don't just wake up, your business burned kind of thing. It always starts rather small and insignificant. She might have considered herself an honest person, but then she told a lie. And that lie begat another lie. And then she had to start making up all kinds of lies of why she's going out early nights or early mornings and late at night and where she is. But eventually it becomes a lifestyle for this woman. Promising herself that this is just a one-time thing eventually becomes a lifestyle. And so here she is. She was attending synagogue, trying to convince herself and excuse her lifestyle with these thoughts. But I deserve to be happy. I deserve to be happy. And so this is another ordinary day as she sneaks off to see this man that she's been with for a prolonged period of time. And this time, it actually happens. The door is slammed open. The men waiting outside rush in and grab hold of her. She screams out, "Forgive me." She could do anything to return at this moment back to her old previous life, be at home with her kids and her husband, right? She would do anything at this moment to return back. What will the kids say? What will the husband say? What will the church community say? And they drag her into the church, into the synagogue. Hundreds of people, religious leaders. The popular preacher from Nazareth is there. All eyes are glued and fixated. And she looks down in humiliation and shame. She can't even look up at the eyes that are directed and gazing at her. The secret that she's been living for a long time is laid bare before everyone at this moment. Her eyes are opened, and for the first time in a long time, she can actually understand. She can actually see how she got here. This wasn't forced on her. No, she chose it. She chose this life. Yes, she was wounded, and yes, she had excuses, and yes, all kinds of yes. But she chose this life, and the hundreds of little choices led to this moment, and this woman bears the full weight of a hidden life, of a hidden life made public at this moment. And her thoughts that are relaying through her mind are interrupted with the words, "Stone her, stone her." Now, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, the two groups of people that bring this woman to Jesus, they don't normally appreciate each other. These guys are not necessarily friends. But as sometimes happens, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. It works out here as well. And so these group of people, they bring to Jesus this woman. They plot it together. Now, Pharisees have gotten a bad rap over the years. Some of it deservedly so, others, not so much. But let me just highlight a little bit of the tendency of a Pharisee. What moved a Pharisee of that ancient world? Well, you imagine they are religious leaders. Imagine that they, for a long period of time, they understand that the Jewish people are God's chosen people. They should be leading. They should be blessing. But here they are, year after year, decade after decade, under the boot of empire. And it's not just one empire. It's one after the other, from Babylonians to the Persians and on and on. And at this instance, when the story takes place, guess who is lording over them? The Romans. And so the Pharisees are essentially asking the question, why? Why? Why are we always under the boot of empire? Why does this keep happening? And the only explanation that they offered was this. Their explanation was that we have gotten too comfortable with God's law, and we have outright forsaken God's law. We have assimilated to the culture at large, and as a result, we are under judgment. And so their answer to how we can get back to normal living was we have to start taking God's law seriously again. And this was their motivating principle in life. And so this woman is caught in the act of adultery, and she's thrown at Jesus' feet. And they bring, this popular preacher from Nazareth. They ask him, Jesus, what are we going to do with this woman? She was caught like red-handed in the act. Moses' law says that such people that are caught in adultery, they need to be stoned. What are you going to do, Jesus? How are you going to respond? And here, you can just see it's the perfect trap. It's a perfect trap with layers for us to explore. From one side, Jesus is caught between, you could put it this way, between Moses and Caesar. But from another side, Jesus is caught between the justice and the goodness of God. And for those of you who are confused, let me unpack this for a few minutes. The law of Moses states that anyone committing adultery is to be stoned to death. It's there in the law, right? Like, you can't deny that. It's an absolutely devastating penalty for those who break their marriage covenant, right? Imagine some of you, I know a number of you have been married. You guys did your vows, right? Yeah, absolutely. We have our traditional vows for rich or for poor, for better, for health, for sickness. And what if there was this little caveat that was at the very end of it? And if you cheat or if you commit adultery, you're going to get stoned. How many of you guys would say, I'm not getting married? Now, you don't have to pick up your hand. I'm kidding. Some of you guys are like, oh my goodness, that ride home is just going to be uncomfortable if you raise your hand. But according to the law of Moses, you were to be stoned. And so this is serious, this is weighty, this is visceral. It's, you feel it in your bones almost, right? And so that's the law of Moses. But here's the catch. Caesar forbid Jews to carry out capital punishment. It was a crime against Rome. You could not do that as a Jewish person. So what are the options? Reject and refuse the call to stone her. And they will say, oh, you're just ignoring Moses' law. But Jesus didn't come to abolish the law. Matthew 5 highlights that. Jesus says it himself. I didn't come to abolish the law. But if you stone her, well, you can be tried by Rome because you are not allowed to, as a person, to stone, to carry out capital punishment. And so Jesus is sort of caught in this trap. What do? Do you go one? Do you go the other? How do you play this? But on top of that, there's another layer. Jesus stands between the question of, what are you going to be led by? The justice of God or the compassion of God? One of the oldest markers, biblical passage that highlight who God is found in Exodus chapter 34. The one that the Jewish people would recite and repeat and memorize and have memorized their whole life practically. Look how it reads. The Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. So what will Jesus offer this woman at this moment? Is it the compassionate, the gracious God? Or is it the one that does not leave the guilty unpunished? Is it the justice of God or the compassion of God? What is Jesus going to be leading her with? If you stone her, well, people say, well, what about the compassionate God? If you say, oh, it's not a big deal, people say, well, what about the justice of God? And so this, my friends, is a perfect trap on many levels and with many layers associated with it. Or modern parlance, you could say this is a form of checkmate. Jesus cannot wiggle out of this trap here. And what we have, the text highlights that Jesus kneels on the ground and starts writing in the sand. Many folks have asked, oh, what is Jesus writing? What is Jesus doing? Scribbling some things on the temple floor. What is that all about? I don't necessarily have the right answer, but a number of folks have asked, give your best shot. And so let me offer you maybe a thought along those lines. My answer would go something along the lines of in Exodus 31, it says, when the Lord had finished speaking to Moses on Mount Sinai, he gave him the 2 tablets of the covenant law, the tablets of stone inscribed by the finger of God. And so there is something within Jewish consciousness about the finger of God writing on the stone tablets that convey a certain meaning. And so Jesus here repeats that similar posture on the temple floor. He's taking his finger and he is writing and he is scribbling something down. Jesus is writing in the sand the law that the Jewish people would have connected to God, writing on tablets with his finger. I love how this one writer, how he puts it. He says, they remind him of the law. He in turn reminded them that he had written the law. The same finger in a symbolic sense that was now writing in the tablets of stone on the temple floor also wrote on the tablets of stone on Sinai. And so Jesus potentially is writing that they're also breaking the law. Why? Because the law stated that it was man and woman that were caught in the adultery act that both had to be tried, not one party. And Jesus is probably saying, you're breaking the law of partiality because you let the man go, but you are trying to condemn the woman. And so Jesus is probably writing the real law that they are actually missing out on. And so the text says, they didn't just question him, they kept on questioning. You're the rabbi. What's the call? What are you going to do, Jesus? Come on, we got you in a good one. Come on, give us the answer, right? And so you can imagine like this crowd is almost like taunting, like, come on, Jesus, we're here, we're ready. You can't wiggle your way out. And finally, Jesus stands up. You can imagine pin drop silence. How is this man from Nazareth going to respond and act? Go ahead and stone her, he says. That's what the law says. But there's just one rule and there's only one caveat. Let the guy without sin go first. There's a Catholic version of the story that goes like this. A stone comes whizzing past Jesus' ear and barely hitting the woman, whereas Jesus turns and says critically, stay out of this, mother. And this is for those of you with a Catholic background. You might appreciate that one. But it says Jesus goes back to writing in the sand. And one by one, they start leaving. The stones are dropped. Out. One guy, they start from the oldest to the youngest, all of them out. And then the text says, Jesus is left all alone with this woman. And here's the great irony. Here's the one person that can actually pick up a stone to throw it at her. Here's the one person that truly doesn't have a sin. And what does he say? Where are your accusers? I love this tone of Jesus. I love this response. Woman, where are your accusers at? Where are those guys with all those stones? Has no one condemned you? And I can imagine the woman, just relief. I'm not dead. I get life again. And he says, no one, Lord, no one has condemned me. And Jesus responds with these words, neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. So beautiful, right? Now this passage, perhaps more than any other, helps us see a particular dimension, a particular aspect of who Jesus is. This passage helps us to see, if I could define it in one phrase, the tenderness of Jesus. The tenderness of Jesus. We see a Jesus that is gentle, a Jesus that is brilliant, a Jesus that is in tune with the pain of individuals, that's not going to put up to traps from religious leaders, right? Charles Spurgeon, the great Baptist preacher of the 18th century, 19th century, he highlights and he points out how if you read the Gospels, the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the four Gospels, there's a total of 89 chapters. But if you were to break down and you were to analyze those 89 chapters of gospel writing, there's only one instance and one place in all of the four Gospels where Jesus talks and peels behind the curtain, if you will, to reveal what his heart is all about. Only one place. Are you guys interested in what Jesus speaks or how Jesus speaks of his heart? What moves him? What leads him? Let me offer this to you. This is Matthew 11. Jesus says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. And hear this, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For I am lowly and gentle of heart. Friends, we read and we learn much in the four Gospels about Christ's teaching. In the four Gospels, we come across his birth, his ministry, his invitation of apprentices under him. We are told of his travels. We are told of his prayer habits and his disciplines, if you will. We learn the way he understood himself in connection to the Old Testament. We see all of this. We learn in the four accounts his unjust arrest, his shameful death, his glorious resurrection. We see this in the four Gospels, but there is only one place where the veneer is peeled back, the curtain is peeled back, and Jesus reveals his heart. This is who I am. This is my heart. And he is gentle and lowly of heart. One chapter later, in Matthew 12, quoting the prophet saying that when Messiah comes, this is what he is going to do. And this prophetic word that the Messiah is going to come, and when he comes, he's going to see many bruised reeds. And for those of you who don't fully understand what a bruised reed is, I have a picture for you up front here. The prophet said that when Messiah comes, he's going to encounter many bruised reeds, barely hanging, bent, broken by religion and broken by different systems. But the word is, a bruised reed he will not break. Isn't that amazing? That when Messiah comes, he will see bruised reeds, but a bruised reed he will not break. And so the word for us today, Anthem Church, are you bruised? Are you bruised? Maybe you're bruised by the opinions that people have made about you. Maybe you're bruised today by the pains and just the simple burdens of life. Maybe you've been bruised by people that you thought had your good intention at their heart, and they really didn't. They betrayed you. Are you bruised? Maybe by people in the church who were tasked with representing God well, and they failed in that objective. Listen to this. Christ will not break a bruised reed. He doesn't break. He doesn't. Why? Because he's tender. He's gentle and he's lowly of heart. He doesn't break bruised reeds, and that is good news for us today. That's good news for us today. Gary Smalley tells the story he heard of the professor when he was in class at a university. And this professor, he taught a speech class, and he would often tell his students, he would begin every semester by having the students tell them one thing that they like about themselves and one thing that they despise about themselves. And so it was a typical class day. The students are all sharing one thing they like, one thing they despise. And eventually, the time came for Dorothy to introduce herself, and all they hear is silence in the room. Thinking perhaps she did not hear the question, the teacher takes his seat. He goes to the back of the auditorium, and he places it right next to Dorothy, and he says, "Dorothy, would you like to share with us?" And Dorothy is just sitting there, head down, hair covering her face. And so she finally, with a deep sigh, she sits up in her chair, she pulls back her hair, and in the process reveals her face. And covering all side of her face is a large, irregularly shaped birthmark, nearly as red as her hair. And she says, "This is what I hate about myself. This is what I can't stand about myself, what I despise about myself," pointing at the red mark on her face. And moved with compassion, the professor leaned over, gave her a hug, and kissed her right on that cheek with the big red mark, and says, "That's okay. God and I still think you are beautiful." And Smalley says that it was about 20 minutes of uninterrupted weeping where Dorothy was just undone. Weeping in the class, tears falling from her eyes. She couldn't control herself. And eventually she says, "I have wanted so much for someone to hug me and say what you had said. Why couldn't my parents do that? My mother won't even touch my face." Friends, somewhere deep down within each and every one of us is a profound hunger for tenderness and compassion. Are you with me this afternoon? And so how is Jesus able to offer a word of tenderness, of no condemnation to this woman? How is Jesus able to do this? Well, let's just step back and consider. Jesus is all alone with this woman. Here is one person that can make the accusation and can throw the stone at her. The one person that can do it. And he forfeits his right to do it. Why? Because Jesus understood his whole life's mission was not to condemn. His mission was not to condemn. Look how it says in John 3. The Son of God didn't come into the world to condemn the world, but that through him he might save the world. And this is why Jesus understands his life is about being condemned, not condemning others. And there's this fascinating play in John chapter 8. It begins with religious leaders picking up stones to throw at this woman. But by the end of the chapter, you see that the religious leaders are picking up stones to throw them at Jesus. And you see, even within this kind of the writer is highlighting that the stones were never really intended to never go at the woman. The stones were never really intended for the woman. All along, they wanted them to go to Jesus. All along, they wanted to throw the stones at Jesus because it was Jesus that they were truly after, not necessarily this woman. Friends, but there came a day when the stones actually were hurled at Jesus. Are you with me today? There was a time when the stones were actually thrown in his direction, where Jesus is placed on a cross, suspended between heaven and earth. And once again, you could put it this way, he is caught between Moses and Caesar. The law of Moses says that anyone who is hung on a tree is accursed by God. And here is Jesus hanging on a tree, bearing the curse in his very body. Caesar, the only person that could give a capital punishment was Pilate, this sort of puppet version of Caesar in the Jewish nation. And what does Pilate do? With the approval, with Caesar's approval and full right, he lays claim and says, "You can crucify this Christ." And so as a result, Jesus is hung on the cross. But more so, even being caught between Caesar and Moses, you know what? There's a deeper layer to the cross. And you know what that is? Jesus is caught between the justice and the goodness of God. The justice and the goodness of God. The justice of God is sin is not going to go unpunished. Sin is not just going to be overlooked. And Jesus hangs up to receive the full brunt of the justice of God into himself. He is killed. He is killed, receiving the full justice of God on our behalf. But at the same time, my brothers and sisters, the compassion of God is fully on display. Do you know why? Because it is not you and it's not me and it's not the woman caught in adultery, but it is Christ who is receiving all this, revealing the compassionate God on full display. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. So let me just close by addressing two types of people that might be sitting in this church today. Two types of people that the text highlights and the text reveals. The first group, like the woman caught in adultery, you carry within yourself secrets, even here today at church. John Ortberg writes that as long as I carry around a secret, I carry a burden. Borrowing and using the famous maxim, he writes, you are as sick as your secrets. Friends, all of us have secrets. Or at least all of us have secrets at one time of our life or another. Ones that are just, we are in the grip of and we can't shed. We are terrified at the thought of being found out. So the question for us is, what secrets do you carry in your person today? What secrets do you carry? Secrets concerning relationships or your marriage. Secrets concerning your very own self, thoughts of how you view yourself, secrets concerning God and religion, secrets concerning your thought patterns, secrets, friends, here's the danger with them. They create a life of shame. Largely when these secrets, they just, the damaging part about them is that they will go on to define and determine the outcome of our life. The way we think about ourselves and the way we think about others, secrets have a profound role in shaping and forming us. There is in the spiritual life a certain principle of soul. And let me just, young man, young woman, older man, older woman, just hear me for a second. There is a principle of soul. In the same way that there is a law of gravity, that what comes down, what goes up must come down. There's also a principle of soul that is akin to the law of gravity. That just as you can't violate one, you can't violate the other. And you know how I would describe this principle of soul? The following way. If you carry a bunch of secrets in your soul, the end result is you get shame. You get shame. They just work in tandem. Secrets beget shame. And it alters the way we think of ourselves profoundly. This is why Brendan Manning, he highlights and he says one of the most shocking contradictions in Christian living is the intense dislike many disciples of Jesus have for themselves. He says, many folks that I go and I travel and I preach to, many people, they can't stand themselves. Why? Because many people are living and caught in the grip of shame. They can't let it go. And the word for us, those who carry secrets today, is simply this. You don't have to carry those secrets anymore. Friends, you don't have to. For those of you with secrets, listen, you are more loved than you can imagine. You are more than loved than you can imagine, even with your secrets. Yeah. Even with your secrets, you are more loved than you imagine. You don't have to carry. And this is why you are so loved. Jesus does not want you to continue living in secrets. He came and died so that you could remove them. You could give them up. But there's a second group, and you carry stones. Similar to the religious leaders, you carry stones ready to throw at other people. And I highly doubt that any of you came into this church building with literal stones, but I'm talking a little bit deeper here. The proverbial stones that we just keep in our pockets so that we know just the perfect time to throw at our spouse, to throw the person that we don't like, the coworker that just irritates us, those stones that we throw, stones of contempt and condemnation and accusation, where you feel morally superior to other people because of your, higher religious pedigree of sorts, or maybe your theological sort of, acumen, a little bit more theology than them, or maybe, you pride yourself as a very admirable person. Friends, for those of you with stones, hear this, you are worse than you think you are. Are you with me? You are worse than you think you are. And that's the truth. And the gospel comes as good news for those with secrets and those with stones. And the gospel comes and says, listen, those of you who carry secrets and those who carry stones, you are worse than you think you are. But the good news, the flip side is you are more loved than you dare believe. You're more loved than you dare believe. And there's hope and there's the tenderness and the compassionate Christ that wants to meet you, even with your stones in your pocket or secrets in your other pocket. Christ wants to meet you and offer you a word of tenderness. You are not condemned, but you are loved. That's the word for us today. And so, Anthem Church, may we be a community, may you be a community that attempts to reveal the nature of the tenderness of Jesus. That when you have all kinds of people coming in through these doors from all backgrounds and all walks of life, they would not be coming in with stones kind of thrown at them, but they would be coming in feeling the aroma of the gentleness and the tenderness of Jesus. And they ask, what is this place all about? And we just say, listen, this is a place of a group of people who have met the tender Jesus and they want to give likewise. Can you please stand to